Listeners, what do you do when the memory you need most for your memoir is the one you can't quite reach? So many writers get stuck in the gaps, the holes, and the slippery places where memory falters, especially when trauma is involved. It's easy to let doubt keep you so stuck you stop writing. If you're questioning how to tell your story or whether you're allowed to tell it, today's episode is for you. In this follow-up to my episode with Stacy Simmons on the nature of memory, I'm joined by award-winning author of 9 works of nonfiction and poetry, Sue William Silverman, for a deeply honest and craft-heavy conversation about what to do when you can't remember. We talk about how to work with fragmented memories, how to use structure, voice, and sensory details to tell the emotional truth of your story, and how to trust yourself even when certainty is impossible. If you've ever felt stalled by memory gaps, afraid of getting it wrong, or unsure how to write what you can't fully recall, this episode will give you both permission and practical tools to keep going. Let's dive in. Welcome to Writing Resilience, the podcast for writers who want to write and live the story that sets them free. I'm your host, Lisa Cooper Ellison, a writer, transformational and trauma-informed coach, story alchemist, and fellow traveler on the winding road of healing and creativity. Each week, I'll share tools, practices, and conversations that will help you let go of what no longer serves you as you create stories that change lives, especially your own. Together, we'll explore how to trust your creative voice, support your mental health and resilience, work with your nervous system and unique design, and stay connected to your deepest calling as a writer, even when life gets messy. It's time, my friends, to write and live the story that sets you free. I'm honored to walk that journey alongside you, one story and one episode at a time. Well, hello, Sue. Welcome back to the podcast and happy 2026. I'm so happy that you are here today.
Thank you. It is so nice to see you again. I mean, this is a great way to begin 2026, looking at your face and talking to you. So thank you.
I feel exactly the same way. When I saw your name on my calendar, I was like, yes, it's Sue Day. I'm so excited.
Well, I do feel the same way. So thank you for having me again. It's really an honor.
Well, I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have about what I would say is the number one issue that writers talk about, which is what do you do when you don't remember something and you're writing a memoir? Like, how do you navigate that? We're going to dive into that deeply and we're going to talk about the nuance in relation to how you navigate this. But before we do that, most people in the writing community know who you are, but there may be some people who are new to the podcast. They've never heard of you and your many, many books that you've written. What would you like people to know about you today?
Well, mainly that I do write creative nonfiction, and I started out writing 2 full-length memoirs, with a straight-through narrative, and my most recent book is Selected Misdemeanors: Essays at the Mercy of the Reader here. And this is a collection of flash pieces, and in between that, I've written also essay collection. So, basically, my arc as a writer has been from long form memoir, say about 250 pages or so with a straight through narrative, to now writing just these flash pieces that still are thematically congruent, but just very short pieces. Also, I'm the program co-chair of the low residency MFA in writing program at Vermont College of Fine Arts.
And I just want to say shout out to Selected Misdemeanors because it recently won an award.
Well, it was long listed.
Long listed.
Yeah.
I feel like it should win.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the Penn Award for the Art of the Essay, and it's longlisted with 9 other books, and we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say this. I am so amazed that it got this far that I really am content if this is where it ends up, but we'll see. They'll be announcing the winner later this year.
Well, my fingers, my toes, and I'm going to say my eyes are crossed,
Thank
hoping that you
you.
are the winner because that is a huge deal. And yes, just to be longlisted is a big deal. That's winning in and of itself. And I'm just cheering you on because I'm a fan.
Thank you. That means a lot. It really does. Thanks.
Well, we're going to get to our conversation today about what do you do if you cannot remember something in your memoir, especially if it's a memory that feels slippery, has trauma in it. And you feel like you need to be able to trust yourself. And there's something about this memory that keeps you from doing that. You've written a lot of books, and I want to take us back first to that first book because I remember Terror Father, I Remember You. That's your first memoir, the one that has that straight through narrative. And the reason I want to talk about that book first is because one, it's that straight through narrative, which so many people are trying to write. And also, it was the first, right? The place where you didn't know the rules, you didn't know how to do things. And I'm curious to know what your process was like and how you engaged with the memories that you had. So, like, did they come fully formed? Were you reaching for them? Did some come along the way? So, how did you navigate that process?
Yeah, so when I did write it, I actually the only memoir I'd read before that was The Diary of Anne Frank, which, doesn't count because that's Anne Frank. And so I really didn't know what I was doing. But actually, I should hasten to add that I had spent 10 years writing fiction before I wrote this first memoir. Really bad fiction, these bad novels, but each of them, they were autobiographical. So I was sort of trying to tell my story. And I think at that point, I didn't have the courage to just kind of claim this is my story. So I tried it as fiction for about 10 years. And then really it was my therapist who said, Sue, why don't you try writing your story as memoir? And initially I thought, I don't have anything to say about myself. And he convinced me to try, and I did. And honestly, I wrote the first draft of the book in 3 months. So in fact, I did have something to say about myself. So and I didn't know really what I was doing, but I just kinda went on energy. I just sort of followed my energy, and I just started writing, and the writing process is so different from the thinking process. If I had just stayed in my head thinking, "Okay, did it happen this way? Did it happen that way? What happened? I don't remember." I still, to this day, probably would not have a book, but the writing process itself helps engage your memory, particularly when you're writing through the senses. Like, the senses belong in the body. I mean, that's where they live. They live in your body. They happen to know a lot more than your head knows when it comes to this. And so I started writing sort of episodes, sort of through sensory memories. The 2 things that I remembered both in my body and in my head really clearly were that the house where I was born, Southern Avenue in Washington, D.C., I remembered my father was building furniture in the living room. We had this big saw, so there's always this whirring noise and this scent of sawdust. And that I'd read this little kid's story in Highlights magazine about an Egyptian princess. So those were the 2 things I remembered. So that's the starting place. So I started writing about this saw. At first, it's just a saw. My father's building furniture. But as I began to write it and I got inside the sensory memories associated with it, I came to understand that this saw was a metaphor for terror, for bad things happening. Saw slices wood. Well, my father was sexually molesting me. So metaphorically, it kind of felt the same. So as I started writing, first gathering these sensory details and then understanding what they were a metaphor for, that prompted another memory, more sensory details. And so one memory, one image can sort of invite the next one onto the page in a way. And so when you start out, you'll have sensory details, you have sensory memory, and trust them because your body really does remember. And so don't start questioning, like trying to remember it like in your head. It's really a matter of trusting those sensory details to be accurate. And they are, they're emotionally true. And even if there may be some facts that maybe in reality didn't happen, nobody cares. It's just this writing memoir is a search for emotional truth.
Yes.
The facts is not an academic treatise, it's not for a PhD, it's not for a court of law. It's just your best feeling of what happened to you. And if you just trust that, then it does open up sort of the memory your memory bank, and you could just go with it.
I love that answer, and it's making me think of 2 things. One, in Melanie Brooks' book, Writing Hard Stories, which you are in, Andre Dubus III, he talks about there was this one place in his memoir where he was looking in this mirror, and it seemed like it was really gray outside. Like that was the memory that he had. It was cloudy, and he could have gone back and looked at what was the weather that day. Was it really cloudy? Was it sunny? And he said it doesn't matter because in memory, the clouds were aligned with the emotional tenor of that moment. And that's what mattered.
Exactly.
Yeah, sometimes I think that is the way forward. And I know when I'm writing, sometimes I'll make up details or I won't care what the details are in a first draft. Like what I mean is like I will put what my mind tells me the details are. It's not like I'm just trying to make things up because that's how I stay in a state of flow. Whereas if I were to go, oh, was the couch really brown or was it green?
I know, and then you spend a month obsessing about this
Right,
couch, and it doesn't
exactly.
matter, right?
Yes. Yeah, and there's something that you capture when you put these things down, and let's say that you do think that it's brown or it's black, and then you find out it's white. You can be really curious about why is it brown in my memory? What does this tell me about my emotional state or the emotional state of what was happening in that scene or something else that is important to the story that I'm telling?
Exactly, because the way you remember it as a reader, and I'm reading your book, what you think it is, what you feel it is much more important than what it actually is, because it's the adult us now, we're actually doing the writing. And when we reflect back, I want to know what your state of mind is. I mean, all these details, all these sensory details are meant to convey the narrator's interiority. And that's what I care about is like, what are you feeling? What does this mean to you?
Yeah, so step 1 is just write, and don't
Yes.
worry about whether or not it's true because you can do some fact checking later on
If you need to.
if you need to, exactly, and the reality is so much of what we write gets cut, and so it's why line editing is not important in the first draft.
Yes, yes, very
You're
good
gonna waste so
point.
much time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first we want to write. I am curious. And I feel like this is really personal to me because one of the things I'm writing about in the project I'm working on is what I'm going to call a reconstituted memory. I'm using Stacy Simmons terminology. I recently had a conversation with her and she was on the podcast in the fall and she wrote The Queen's Path, which is a book about female sovereignty. And so when we were talking about reconstituted memories, or what some people might call recovered memories, there are things that we are going after when we are writing that we may not fully remember, no matter how much we try. And it feels like there's a hole in the book. And so we have to figure out what we're going to do with that so that we can keep writing and we can trust our stories. And when I was thinking about this, because like you, this is a question I am asked all the time, I wanted to unpack it in terms of the inner work we have to do to keep believing in our stories when we know there are holes, maybe because of trauma or because we weren't there, but some detail is important or something else is going on that keeps us from connecting with that information. So, what's that inner work we have to do to keep believing in our story? And then we're going to talk about what do you do on the page. So, thinking about your first memoir or any of the books that you've written, because you've written so much about your personal life, have there come points where you don't remember and you confront that inner anxiety or fear of like, well, do I really know the story? Can I tell this story? What happens if I put this out in the world and something's missing? Listeners, have you finished a first draft of your memoir but aren't sure what comes next? What if the secret to making your story resonate with readers isn't more pages, but instead a clearer question at the heart of your book? On February 25th, I'm teaching a live online class with Jane Friedman called Identify Your Memoir's Essential Question. In 90 minutes, you'll learn how the right essential question can shape your story, give your book purpose, and help you decide what truly belongs on the page and what doesn't. Whether you're stuck in the messy middle or polishing for submission, this class gives you a repeatable process to revise more confidently and start seeing your memoir through a fresh lens. Join me, Lisa Cooper Ellison, on February 25th at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time to unlock your memoir's central question. Register today by going to janefriedman.com.
That is a really good question, and I still trust the process in terms of finding a different kind of structure for that piece. So, in other words, like if I don't have, say, a straight through narrative because they're missing pieces, they're holes, and so I don't have a straight through narrative, then I consider a different structure. For example, I have an essay called The Girl Summer Vacation, Some Questions. So in reality, there's this vacation that my mom, my sister, and I had in Los Angeles. I know that vacation was really significant, but I can't remember why. I'm really not sure, except my father wasn't there, maybe my parents were thinking about divorce, but I'm not sure, and there's nobody to ask, and I wouldn't trust their memories any more than I would trust mine, so I wouldn't even ask anybody. So, I didn't have a straight through narrative for the summer vacation because there was no straight through narrative. But what I did is I made it into like a list essay, and the subtitle, Some Questions, I made them in the form of questions that I, as author, was sort of interrogating myself as narrator. Like, could it have been this? Was it this? Was it that? And by asking the questions and by making it like a list, like I think there maybe 30 questions, I can't remember now, but a bunch of questions, I was actually able to reconstruct. I didn't get all the facts of what that summer was, but I really did capture the feel of that summer vacation and that there was this murky, shadowy stuff going on, and that the narrator was able to question, well, why isn't the father there? And, it doesn't take, a rocket scientist. Oh, well, there was something going on. Maybe, if three members of the family are off on a so called vacation and the father's not there, there's some stuff going on. So by asking questions, I really do feel good about the essay in that it conveyed exactly what I wanted to convey without having like, oh, flew into California and then this happened, then that happened. I didn't need that at all to make this essay feel complete. So a good thing to do is think about both a kind of fragmented structure or speculation, like the if thing. If that happened, then could this have been true? Or maybe it was this way. So you can use words like maybe it was this way or possibly that way. A word that I like the most is that I imagine that this happened. And then you're not at all lying to the reader. The reader knows you're just imagining things and that you're trying to get to the heart of the matter. And what you end up with is going to be really your truth. And so it's just a matter of getting over the fear of thinking, oh God, I've got to know everything, and finding a different way to tell the story, different structure, asking questions, supposition, speculation. Just by going in that kind of a direction, you're going to find your story. I mean, it's going to be really accurate because once we start interrogating ourselves, we really do know more than we think we know.
I 100% agree. And what I want to say is that as I was listening to you, what I hear is that when there's doubt, you go to strategy, and that is structure, right? So it's about, okay, I'm feeling this doubt. I'm going to go to what I can do on the page. And that gives you a sense of control. And I remember reading that essay, which I believe is in Acetylene Torch Songs.
It is.
So if people want to read that, that is a great place to read it. And also, that is an excellent craft book. So I highly recommend it.
Thank you.
Because what I love about it is you don't just share that essay, you unpack that essay, right? You help us
Yeah.
understand what you did. And you do that for all the essays that you share in that book. And that's one of the reasons it's so unique. Another example of a fractured memoir would be Janine Ouellette's memoir, The Part That Burns. She did that, and she did a lot with a really complex topic, which was also sexual abuse and early childhood sexual abuse. And so, how do you navigate something that is so difficult? I think both for the writer, but also can be difficult for the reader, right? In terms of how do you digest that? What meaning do you want to make of it? So that it's not just like, here's this horrific thing that happened, but you're actually doing work with it, because that's why readers come to the work. It's also why writers come to it. But that's another great example. And in terms of that speculation piece you're talking about, Sharon Harrigan, she does that really well in her memoir, Playing with Dynamite. She was one of my mentors, so I know about her book, which is really well done. And she makes it really clear. And it's important for her to be able to do speculation in her memoir because she's writing about her father who died when she was 7 years old. So there's a lot that not just that she doesn't remember, but also that she wasn't present for that was important to the story. And she didn't want to
Yeah.
just have it be reportage.
No, right, exactly. By writing through these details and turning them into metaphors, then the metaphor is conveying so much depth to your story, and that's what makes it universal as well, so that if somebody doesn't have the exact same experiences you've had, they can relate to it through metaphor, which is a universal option that we have, and yeah, I mean, it's really a leap of faith that, "Okay, I can't remember this, but I know there's a story. I feel something around this moment in time. Something happened. I wanna get at it." And it's a leap of faith that you just find the courage. I mean, you can tell yourself, "Okay, nobody's gonna read this," tell yourself all these stories. "I just need to figure this out for myself." Later on, you can think about publishing it. But first of all, just don't stop writing because you can't, as you say, remember what color the couch was or
Right,
something,
exactly.
or even some big gap in the memory. If you speculate about it, if you ask yourself the right questions, that's your truth. I mean, that is your truth, and that is shedding light on your interiority, which, as I say, I mean, that's why readers read memoir. They want to be at one with the narrator and their story, and so if you just speculate and you ask yourself the questions, as I said, the thing about that vacation in Southern California, there's so many facts, they're just gone. But I know I captured the essence of those 3 months that I spent in Southern California. I mean, I know that I did, and it wasn't through trying to remember, "Oh god, was it this or was it that?" It was just asking questions, and one question would lead to another, and one image. I mean, that's the other thing that writers really need to trust, that once you start writing, once you get one sensory image on the page, do a list, go through what does it sound like, smell like, taste like, feel like. Go through the 5 senses, and when you're really drilling down into the senses, one image just will lead you to another and will lead you to even concrete memories. I mean, that's what happened in the first book that you asked. My first book is that I would be writing something and working on a sensory image, and all of a sudden, oh my god, yes, I would remember something really specifically. But I wouldn't get that if I weren't in that moment, if I weren't writing. Just sitting around thinking, it's not gonna happen. Sit down, start writing, and your brain just sort of opens up and expands as your senses sort of allow it to.
Absolutely, and I love what you said. You said you captured the essence. And so when we're thinking about memoir, we don't need to think about truth, we need to think more about essence. Like, what is the essence? And an exercise that I often give to writers is it's about this, but what it's really about, right, is getting to that essence. And that essence is, if you think about essential oils, right? When I was teaching in person a lot more, I would bring essential oils with me, specifically orange oil. And when people would smell it, they would connect to some experience they've had with oranges, right? And so you're not holding an orange there, you're holding the essence of the orange. And it's that essence that leads to memory. And so memory also leads to some emotional essence that you're experiencing. I think the other thing that can be really helpful is that self talk, right? So that mantra you've said multiple times, just write, just come to the page. And sometimes what I'll say to myself when I don't remember something, it feels like there's a real hole. And I think this is what actually became the origin of the memoir that I'm working on right now is that what you don't remember is sometimes the story. And that's kind of what I've been sitting with is that self talk of what I don't remember is sometimes the story. And how do we get to it? We interrogate it.
Yeah, ask it question after question after question. And because ultimately the questions we ask are much more interesting than the answers, right? And
Yes.
so what are the questions? I mean, because if you come up with 5 questions to interrogate yourself, why those 5 questions? Where did those come from? That's revelatory.
Yes.
That's what's revelatory because that shines light on who you are as the narrator. Like, if these 5 questions occur to me, I mean, that's what you need to know. That's it right there, and that's just so revealing of the self, like, why these 5 questions, not those 5 questions? The reason why I chose these 5 questions is because those do speak to the event, the moment in time that you're trying to capture.
Absolutely. And this is leading to a sidebar question, which I think relates to all of this. And it's about the work that memoir does. So, when I think about a memoir that I love, what makes it work is not that it's giving me takeaways, right? And so I think that's one of the things that emerging writers want to have in their book, the takeaways, right? They think if there's a takeaway and a prescription and a solution, then you've done the work of memoir. But the best memoirs to me, they elicit a question in me. They make me do more work so that I leave that memoir chewing on the questions that are left behind versus feeling like, oh, and now I know how to do X, Y, and Z with my life.
Yes, absolutely. Oh gosh, that's so important. I mean, I just like,
Like,
yes. Yes,
yes.
yes, yes, because, like, particularly my second book, Love Sick, which is about 28 days I spent in rehab for sex addiction. That was a hard book for me to write. It took about 5 years. If I wanted to write, "Here's how you recover from sex addiction," I could have just blatted that out, like, maybe in a few months, but that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted it to be a memoir, I wanted it to be literary. It's not about, "Here are the steps to recover from sex addiction." I wanted to bring somebody inside the experience of it. I wanted to show how I acted out in the addiction, how I did recover, but it's not like you don't read this book like you would a textbook, written by, say, a therapist or a clinician, like, "Here's how you recover." And because what we're writing is not for takeaways, because we're writing the human experience. We're writing something that's much more universal that would apply to everyone. Because I got letters from women saying, "Well, I'm not struggling with a sex addiction, but yet I learned so much about women and their sexuality and everything from reading your book." So it's not like you're writing for, like, this one specific audience, like other women sex addicts. I it's about alienation, it's about loss, it's about sadness, it's about longing, it's about searching for love. Things that everybody experiences, most everybody. Yeah, so there's not gonna be a takeaway. It's because we're writing the human experience.
And a way that I like to think about it is that we're sharing our experience, strength, and hope, to kind of quote from 12-step programs. And we offer that so that whoever is reading or listening can take from it what they like and leave the rest. Right.
Yeah,
So everybody's going to find their own wisdom, that one thing that speaks to them. And it may not be the quote unquote takeaway that you got from surviving whatever that experience was.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, speaking of hard books to write and really deep personal things that we're working on, I'm curious to know if there has ever been content that you have written about where you write it because you know you have to write it. And you get to the end and you're like, this is not for the world.
Yes. Yes, but it's a little bit more complicated story than that. So there was an event, a thing I did, which was very embarrassing, which had to do with my sex addiction. Clearly, it should, hey, this is no brainer. Put it in Lovesick, the memoir about sex addiction. So I put it in there. I thought, oh God, no, there's no way that's going out in the world. And I just took it out. And in some ways, artistically, that was the right decision because while it did have to do with the addiction, it was, for me, so extreme that it would throw the balance of the book off of what I was really trying to capture. So I just took it out. And also, I didn't have the nerve to put it, to leave it in. But what's so weird, and then I wrote my first essay collection, Peppa Fan Club, and then I was writing a second essay collection, How to Survive Death and Other Inconveniences, and all of a sudden, that section was in that book. And so it was waiting for the right book to appear in and for me to have probably more courage. But more than that, I think artistically, people are going to wonder, well, God, what did she do? I mean, just in a nutshell, with some friends, we crashed a bachelor party and there were some strippers there. And we sort of were mocking the strippers, which was a really not good thing to do. And I sort of started stripping. It did not end well on any level. But I think my shame around that was that I was mocking this. I mean, we were completely drunk, which is not an excuse either, but I was so inappropriate. And my husband was out of town, but all of his friends were there. I mean, it was just a complete train wreck. I mean, I still feel embarrassed talking about it, but yet in How to Survive Death and Other Inconveniences, that book, it's not just about how to survive physical death, although I still really want to, but it's really about how do you survive these small, like, mini deaths, and I consider addiction itself a form of death because you
Yeah.
are sort of emotionally and spiritually killing yourself, and this event was a really strong example of that, how what I did in that evening was completely killing myself spiritually and emotionally. So that book was a better place for it, but it really wasn't meant to be in Lovesick. So save everything. You know, if you take something out of one book, park it in a file someplace, and of course you'll end up revising it, but just at least park the idea of it in a file someplace because there's a good chance it'll end up in another essay or another book. I mean, because we're talking like, oh gosh, maybe 8, 9 years later was when it finally appeared in a book. And it's in a context with some other episodes, so it's not like a standalone thing. So don't throw anything away because you might not have the courage to put it in that book, or it may not be the right book, but it may surface someplace else.
Yeah, I love that there are 2 lenses that you talk about here. So there's the lens of readiness, right? Because so many times we don't wanna put certain things in our work because of shame or fear of someone else's reaction, and those are emotions to respect, right? We don't have to override them because that could be really important to our lives, and it may also be a signal that this isn't the right project, right? So there's that emotional piece about whatever experience you're having related to the content, and then that inner knowing. Like, if you keep having resistance about this piece, no matter what someone else says, trust that it's really important for you to honor what doesn't belong in something, because as you said, there's your readiness and the rightness of a project, and sometimes it's not gonna be the right project.
Yeah, exactly. So just but hold on to it. And even like with the first book about growing up in my incestuous family, I could have actually written Lovesick, put those into one book because obviously the sex addiction occurred because my father sexually molested me, but the voices were different. I mean, they clearly had to be 2 separate books.
So, trusting your gut, trusting the process, trusting the timing, because sometimes things take a while. And I would just say, myself personally, I can be impatient, and I know lots and lots of writers who can also be impatient. And once your work is out there, especially if it's personal in nature, you can't take it back. So, giving yourself the time to get it right is so important.
It really is, and by saying that too, it's just important to remember that we all have more than one book, more than one essay, more than one memoir, so don't, like, try to cram your whole life into one book. I mean, think of your life more thematically, which is another way to help with memory, by the way, because when you think of your life thematically, and then you're gonna focus on just these memories for this one book, and then those memories for another book, then it's also easier to access memory because you're not thinking about your whole life, which is just like, "Oh my gosh, I have to remember my whole life. That's not gonna happen." Take that pressure off yourself and think about your life thematically, and that narrows the number of memories that you need for any given essay or any given book. Honestly, that will help sort of recover or reclaim your memories a lot.
Yeah, just having that space to allow for multiple books, multiple ways of working through your projects, it creates that relaxation. And it's from that relaxed state that we do remember things, right? When we're trying to force ourselves to remember, we close things off. And
Yeah.
that's where we feel stuck.
I know. Another thing that helps with memory is voice. Each of my books really has a different voice in a way. Like writers, we don't get just one voice. You have to find the voice for the content. And sometimes I've been stuck or blocked and think I don't remember that. But it's really been that the voice was wrong. This is not the voice that wants to tell this story. And then I just keep playing around, trying different sounds, different language, different words. And then once I hit with the right voice, then that also helps open the memory banks. All of these craft issues, I think they all kind of speak to memory in a way, because if they're all like hitting on the right cylinders at the same time, then that also just helps with your memory because you can hear the voice of that moment. Yeah, the sensory details I think come first, and I think those help a lot. Then that ties in with structure and then voice. And if you have like your sensory details working for you, you've got the right structure, you have the right voice, that will spur on your memory.
I love that. That is such a great way to wrap up what it is that we're doing. I have one last question I'm going to ask you, which is not on the list of questions that I sent to you, as is often my case. So, we are wrapping up the year of the wood snake, which is a year of shedding, getting rid of, letting go of what no longer serves us so that we can prepare for the year of the fire horse. So, that's what we're going into in Chinese New Year. And the year of the fire horse is about passion, creativity, and innovation. And so, I'm just going to ask you this last question. What is one way that writers can give themselves permission to be innovative? Or is there something that you want them to try to innovate in their own work as they enter this year of the fire horse?
To really put aside your worries and your fears about what people will think of you. It blocks your memory, but it also blocks just your initiative to sit down right in the first place. I mean, so many people say, "Oh God, but what's my mother gonna think? Or what's my sister gonna think? Or what's the New York Times, book review editor gonna think? Or what's my next door." I mean, fear is what stops us. It'll block your memory, it blocks everything. And so when you sit down to write, first and foremost, write for yourself. For me, like I have to explore this, whatever it is, for myself because I have to know what it meant. I have to understand what the metaphor of it is. I want to know how that happened and why it happened. So I just think of myself as sort of like a private detective. I'm on a search for my life and trying to figure it out. So I do write first and foremost for myself. And that takes a lot of pressure off worrying about what people are gonna think of me. I mean, in fact, so I wrote about crashing that bachelor party and doing a quasi striptease. Nobody's even mentioned it to me. Like, I've worried about it for, like, 8 years, right? And nobody even mentioned it. So, just stay within yourself for the first 20 drafts. After that, you can start thinking about the outside world and publishing it. But first, just have the courage to stay within yourself and start writing and believing, well, I have to write this for myself. If you don't understand your life, that's so sad. And if you don't write your story, nobody else is going to write it. So, first and foremost, write for yourself, knowing that you have to figure things out. And then as you go through that process and draft after draft, you'll feel more comfortable with the material. And then you can think about the outside world, but do not think about it now or when you're beginning. Just don't. And then you'll have that as a fire horse.
Yes.
Yes, you'll be this really strong fire horse blazing into the world with your finished manuscript.
Well, I don't think I can add anything to that. That is a beautiful way for us to wrap up today. Thank you so much for being here today, Sue, and for sharing your wisdom with us. I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much. I just love talking to you, really. So it's just been an honor.
The feeling is mutual.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. If you'd like to know more about Sue and, most importantly, buy her award winning books, please see the show notes for this episode. But before you go, I have a writing prompt for you. I want you to think about a moment from your life that feels important, but that you can't fully remember. Write a list of 10 to 20 questions about that moment, then circle the top 3. They likely hold the heart of your story. Try it and then text the show if you're on Apple Podcast or Spotify, or leave a comment on YouTube with your thoughts on this exercise. I would love to know how it went. And speaking of your feedback on the podcast, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Krista Hillhouse and YouBabble for sharing how much you loved my episode on memory with Stacey Simmons. It was so great to hear from you. And listeners, if you haven't reached out to the show, I would love to hear from you too. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I couldn't do this podcast without your support. If you love this episode, here are 3 simple ways that you can keep this show thriving. 1, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. 2, leave a 5-star review so others can find the show. 3, join my engaged dynamic community by signing up for the Writing Your Resilience newsletter. As a thank you, you'll receive a free copy of Ditch Your Inner Critic, 5 Tools to Transform Self-Doubt into Self-Support. Until next time, remember that your story matters. As you write and connect with the truest, most authentic version, you become not just the writer, but the person you're meant to be. And that, my friends, is the real freedom writing can offer.